This episode is brought to you by LifeLock. When you visit the doctor, you probably hand over your insurance, your ID, and contact details. It's just one of the many places that has your personal info. And if any of them accidentally expose it, you could be at risk for identity theft. LifeLock monitors millions of data points a second. If you become a victim, they'll fix it, guaranteed, or your money back. Save up to 40% your first year at LifeLock.com/podcast. Terms apply.
Subtle results, still you, but with fewer lines. Botox Cosmetic, out of botulinum toxin A, is a prescription medicine used to temporarily make moderate to severe frown lines, crow's feet, and forehead lines look better in adults.
Effects of Botox Cosmetic may spread hours to weeks after injection, causing serious symptoms. Alert your doctor right away as difficulty swallowing, speaking, breathing, eye problems, or muscle weakness may be a sign of a life-threatening condition. Patients with these conditions before injection are at highest risk. Don't receive Botox Cosmetic if you have a skin infection. Side effects may include allergic reactions, injection site pain, headache, eyebrow and eyelid drooping, and eyelid swelling. Allergic reactions can include rash, welts, asthma symptoms, and dizziness. Tell your doctor about medical history, muscle or nerve conditions including ALS or Lou Gehrig's disease, myasthenia gravis, or Lambert-Eaton syndrome, and medications, including botulinum toxins, as these may increase the risk of serious side effects. For full safety information, visit BotoxCosmetic.com or call 877-351-0300.
See for yourself at BotoxCosmetic.com.
Every idea starts with a problem. Warby Parker's was simple. Glasses are too expensive. So they set out to change that. By designing glasses in-house and selling directly to customers, they're able to offer prescription eyewear that's expertly crafted and unexpectedly affordable. Warby Parker glasses are made from premium materials like impact-resistant polycarbonate and custom acetate. And they start at just $95, including prescription lenses. Get glasses made from the good stuff. Stop by a Warby Parker store near you.
EVO. This series contains adult language and depictions of graphic violence. Listener discretion is advised. They said he had a hook for a hand, that he dragged children into the tunnels beneath Staten Island, that he prowled the ruins of an old asylum after midnight, waiting for the unwatched, the lonely, the ones whose parents were just a little too late. His name was whispered in the dark, passed along at campfires, school cafeterias, and over trembling flashlights at sleepovers. Cropsey. To those who grew up on Staten Island in the 70s and 80s, he was more than a myth. He was a specter who stood just behind the tree line, just around the bend, just out of view. The adults in our lives, teachers, parents, police officers, would roll their eyes and dismiss him with a chuckle. Just a story, they'd say. Just something the kids made up. But they didn't walk the wooded paths near the old Willowbrook State School. They didn't feel the way the air turned to ice at the edge of the Greenbelt. They didn't know the sound of a distant branch snapping could turn your bones to water. Every town has its boogeyman. But this one was ours. Welcome back to The Devil Within. You're listening to Cropsey. Now, I'm not from Staten Island. I'm from very close to Staten Island in North Jersey, but I knew a bunch of kids from there. So I'm going to speak as an honorary Staten Islander. In the mythology we built around him, Cropsey was part man and part monster. He wore rags. He had wild eyes and dirty fingernails. Some said he was a former mental patient who'd never left Willowbrook when it was shuttered. Others said he was a drifter who'd lost his mind in the tunnels beneath the school, feeding off rats and whatever else he could catch. We didn't agree on the details, but one thing was constant. He took children, and he lived in the dark. And for years, the story remained just that. A story. Something that scared us into getting home before the streetlights flickered on. Something we dared each other to talk about without flinching. And then one summer day in July of 1987, everything changed. Her name was Jennifer Schweiger. She was 12 years old. She was sweet, trusting. She had Down syndrome and a habit of wandering the neighborhood with a calm smile and a quiet curiosity. Her parents kept a close watch on her, but on that particular Sunday afternoon, They'd looked away for just a moment, but long enough. Jennifer walked out of her house and down the street, past the white-fenced yards and rows of modest Staten Island homes, past the sidewalks that still baked under the midsummer sun. She kept walking until she didn't come back. The panic began almost immediately. Flyers were printed, volunteers formed search parties, police officers knocked on doors and questioned neighbors. People scoured every inch of the surrounding area, but it was as if Jennifer had vanished into thin air. And that's when the whispers started again. Cropsey. He took her. For the first time in decades, the old story surged back to life. People remembered the tales they'd once told with uneasy laughter. The fear became sharper and colder, became heavier, because Jennifer wasn't the first child to disappear in those woods, and she wouldn't be the last. The press descended. The New York tabloids ran headlines that blended fact and folklore, truth and terror. They dug up the old stories of missing children from years past, of the derelict institution on the edge of the forest, of the man they now claimed might be behind it all. As the weeks wore on, the search for Jennifer intensified. On the fourth week, a volunteer discovered a patch of disturbed soil in the woods near the ruins of Willowbrook. It looked like nothing, a mound maybe, a shallow dip where animals might have dug. But something about it, some invisible sense, made the man stop, and he began to dig. What he uncovered confirmed every nightmare Staten Island had ever whispered. Jennifer's body lay in a shallow grave. She'd been buried not far from the old asylum tunnels, not far from where, neighbors would later say, a man had been seen camping out. A man with a history. A man whose name was Andre Rand. The police moved quickly. Rand had once been a custodian at Willowbrook decades earlier, and since the school's closure, he'd lived as a transient, sometimes in shelters, sometimes in makeshift camps, often in the woods near the ruins. He was a man of few words and fewer connections, but his past contained some shadows. A conviction for kidnapping in 1969, a string of sightings near where children went missing, and now a body found near his campsite. They arrested him on suspicion of kidnapping, but not murder. The evidence, they said, wasn't definitive. There was no witness to the act. There was no confession. Only circumstantial trails and a collective chill that ran down every local spine. Still, for the people of Staten Island, it was enough. Enough to confirm what we'd always feared. Enough to make the old stories true, because whether he was Cropsey or not, Andre Rand became the face of the legend. The myth had crossed into reality. And suddenly, no one laughed about Cropsey anymore. Beneath the surface of Staten Island lies a graveyard of secrets. Long before it became a symbol of neglect, long before its ruins became synonymous with horror stories and whispered legends, the Willowbrook State School began with good intentions. The year was 1947. World War II had just ended, and America was tilting toward modernity. Staten Island, then mostly a rural borough of New York City, was chosen as the site for a large-scale institution dedicated to the care of children with intellectual and developmental disabilities. The vision was progressive, or so it seemed, an idyllic, self-contained campus set on over 300 acres, tucked into a wooded expanse near Seaview. At first, it was sold as a refuge, a sanctuary where children who couldn't thrive in ordinary society would be given medical care, education, and dignity. But vision has a way of curdling in the hands of bureaucracy. By the early 1960s, Willowbrook was already falling apart. Designed to hold around 4,000 residents, it became a repository for more than 6,000. Overcrowded, underfunded, and understaffed, it began to transform into something else entirely. A holding pen for the unwanted, the forgotten, and the voiceless. Children were left naked in hallways. Some never learned to speak, others never learned to walk, and most never left. The staff, overwhelmed and poorly trained, turned a blind eye to the abuse. Sometimes they were the abusers, and the public, they knew nothing. Or worse, they didn't want to know anything. Then in 1972, the world was forced to look. Geraldo Rivera, then an ambitious local television reporter, had received a tip from a doctor working inside the facility. Armed with a hidden camera and a sense of righteous fury, Rivera snuck into the school and documented what he saw. What he showed the world would become one of the most horrifying exposés in American history. Children rocking back and forth in isolation, others smeared in their own waste, emaciated limbs, vacant stares, groans that echoed through the concrete corridors. No blankets, no toys, and no mercy. The images were broadcast across the nation, and outrage followed like a flood. Politicians called for reform, civil rights attorneys filed lawsuits, parents protested in the streets. And yet, nothing changed overnight.
This podcast is brought to you by Carvana. Got a car to sell but no time to waste? Hop on to Carvana.com to get a real offer for your car in seconds. All you have to do is enter your license plate, answer a few quick questions, and if you accept the offer, Carvana will pay you as soon as you hand the keys over. They even offer same-day pickup in many cities. Save your time, score some cash, and sell your car the convenient way to Carvana. Pickup times vary. Fees may apply.
This episode is brought to you by Progressive, America's #1 motorcycle insurer. Everything is more exhilarating when you're on your motorcycle, just like your bike is more protected when you choose Progressive Motorcycle Insurance. They offer coverage for your bike, starting as low as $75 per year. And they keep things affordable, with discounts like paid in full, multi-policy, and responsible driver. So raise your kickstands and get to quoting at Progressive.com to see if you could save. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. $75 premium is for state minimum coverage. Not available in D.C. Discounts not available in all states or situations.
I'm Cyndi Lauper. My psoriasis was all over, even on my scalp, which may mean 4 times the risk for psoriatic arthritis. But Cosentyx works on both.
Cosentyx secukinumab is prescribed for adults with moderate to severe plaque psoriasis 300 milligram dose and adults with active psoriatic arthritis 150 milligram dose. Don't use if you're allergic to Cosentyx. Before starting, get checked for tuberculosis. An increased risk of infections and lowered ability to fight them may occur, like tuberculosis or other serious bacterial, fungal, or viral infections. Some are fatal. Tell your doctor if you have an infection or symptoms like fevers, sweats, chills, muscle aches, or cough, had a vaccine or plan to, or if inflammatory bowel disease symptoms develop or worsen. Serious allergic reactions and severe eczema-like skin reactions may occur. Learn more at Cosentyx.com or 1-844-COSENTYX. Ask your doctor about Cosentyx.
Honey Bunches of Oats es la forma perfecta de empezar el día con tu familia. Con hojuelas crujientes y miel de verdad que a los niños les encanta. Además, deliciosos trozos de granola, nueces y fruta que todos van a disfrutar. Honey Bunches of Oats es para todos. Toca el banner para saber más.
Willowbrook would not fully close its doors until 1987. That's 15 more years of suffering, 15 more years of abuse, 15 more years of stories lost to time. Even after its official closure, the place never truly died. The buildings, sprawling and many windowed, were left to rot behind rusted chain-link fences. Weeds cracked through the sidewalks, ceilings collapsed, rainwater poured in through shattered skylights. And the tunnels, they remained. Beneath the surface of Willowbrook ran a labyrinth of steam tunnels, maintenance shafts, and forgotten crawl spaces. Some said they stretched for miles, connecting every building on the property. Others swore they went deeper, that they tapped into something older, even something elemental. During Willowbrook's operation, those tunnels were used for transporting supplies, food, sometimes even patients. But afterward, they became something else. Teens dared each other to go inside. Paranormal investigators brought cameras and EMF readers. Some claimed to find bloody clothing. Others found mattresses or children's shoes, ritual markings scrawled in chalk or charcoal. What no one ever found was peace, because they said something still lived down there. Some said it was a vagrant, a holdout, a man who had once worked the grounds and just never left. Others believed it was something less than human, an echo maybe of the building's pain, an entity born of abuse and neglect, a psychic scar. But we had a different name for it. That's right, Cropsey. It wasn't just children who feared those tunnels. Adults, too, began to steer clear of the woods around the ruins. The Greenbelt, the vast stretch of forest that surrounds the old Willowbrook site, became a place of unease. Dogs refused to go down certain paths. Flashlights flickered and died, and the stories grew. We told ourselves it was just a legend, that Cropsey was a campfire story, that Willowbrook was closed. Nothing could live down there. But we also double-locked our doors. We also walked a little faster past the trees at night. Because some truths are buried deeper than our memories, and some wounds never heal. Willowbrook was and remains a scar across Staten Island's conscience, a reminder of what happens when we hide the inconvenient, when we ignore the vulnerable, and believe that out of sight actually means out of mind. But the darkness didn't stay buried. In the years following its closure, missing children began to vanish from neighborhoods nearby. One by one, small, disabled, often poor. They walked to corner stores and never returned. They waved goodbye to their mothers and were never seen again. And each time the shadows beneath Willowbrook seemed to grow. Cropsey, they whispered. But what if it wasn't a ghost? What if it was something worse? So his real name, as stated, was Andre Rand. But that wasn't the name that he was born with. He came into the world in 1944 as Frank Rushan, a quiet boy from the Bronx who would become anything but forgettable. By the time he reached adulthood, he had legally changed his name to Andre Rand. No one knows exactly why. Some say he wanted to escape his past. Others believe it was a sign of delusion, a man untethering himself from identity, morality, and eventually from reality itself. Rand drifted toward the fringes of society early on. He struggled to hold down jobs, to make friends, to live within the boundaries that others called normal. At some point in the late 60s or early 70s, he found employment as a custodian at the Willowbrook State School. Whether he volunteered or was assigned to the night shift is unknown, but the job placed him squarely in the middle of one of the darkest institutions in American history. The school, already infamous by the time Rand arrived, was indeed a place of shadows. There were things done there that the outside world wouldn't believe until they saw them on that Geraldo tape. Rand, like many employees, likely witnessed these horrors daily. Some say that kind of exposure either breaks a man or makes him in its image. He only worked there briefly, and when Willowbrook closed, Rand did something no one else did. He stayed. He didn't move to another borough. He didn't seek out fresh employment or a new start. Instead, he lingered. He camped in the woods that skirted the old asylum. He dug shallow shelters among the roots and the rot. He built a life in the margins. The Greenbelt became his home, and the tunnels beneath Willowbrook, those long-forgotten arteries of maintenance and misery, they became his refuge. By the mid-1980s, local kids knew the stories. They said a man lived in the woods, that he watched from the shadows, that he lurked in abandoned buildings and emerged at night. Parents warned their children to stay away from the ruins, and most did. But Rand didn't go unnoticed. He was seen scavenging through garbage, muttering to himself, following young girls too closely. Once in 1983, he was caught living in a school bus parked illegally in a wooded lot. Children's books, candy wrappers, girls' clothing scattered inside. Police arrested him for trespassing, but he was released a few days later. There wasn't enough to charge him with anything more. Then in 1987, Jennifer Schweiger disappeared. Everyone knew her as a sweet girl with the kind of trusting spirit that made her easy to love and, unfortunately, easy to manipulate. On July 9th, she left her house and was never seen alive again. Searchers and volunteers combed the area near Willowbrook for weeks. Dogs were brought in, helicopters scanned from above, but the land was dense and overgrown. And Rand had lived in those woods for years. He knew every trail and every hollow. Eventually, that volunteer stumbled upon the patch of disturbed earth and started to dig. Jennifer's body lay just beneath the soil, wrapped in makeshift coverings and partially decomposed. Her small frame was curled as if she'd been trying to hide or protect herself. The horror wasn't just in what was found, but in where. Just yards from where Andre Rand had been seen sleeping days earlier. He was arrested immediately, but despite all the circumstantial evidence, prosecutors couldn't make the murder charge stick. There were no witnesses, no forensic smoking gun. He was charged and convicted of kidnapping, but not homicide. Still, the public didn't need a courtroom to convince them. They knew. And then the past began to claw its way back. Investigators and journalists reopened old files. Missing children, mostly girls, all had vanished under eerily similar circumstances. In 1972, 7-year-old Alice Pereira disappeared while playing outside her apartment. Her body was never found. At the time, Rand was living nearby. In 1981, 11-year-old Holly Ann Hughes walked to a corner store in Port Richmond and never came home. Witnesses claimed to have seen a man matching Rand's description talking to her. Again, Rand was questioned, but never charged. In 1983, 11-year-old Tahese Jackson disappeared from the New Brighton area. She had been at a local welfare office with her mother, and Rand was spotted in the vicinity. Then in 1984, 22-year-old Hank Gaforio vanished. Though legally an adult, Hank was developmentally delayed and had the mental capacity of a child. He was last seen at a diner with Andre Rand. One by one, the names piled up, and one by one, the thread grew tighter. At the center, always, was Rand. There were theories, of course, that Rand was a predator working alone, that he had developed a taste for the helpless, that he'd used the tunnels to stalk and to store, to vanish and reappear like a ghost in the system. But others wondered, could he have acted alone? There were rumors, dark ones, that Rand was involved with something larger, that there were others living in the ruins, that rituals had taken place in the Willowbrook tunnels, that Rand was merely the vessel, not the source. These ideas were never proven. The police dismissed them, but in Staten Island, the line between myth and memory had always been pretty thin. Rand remained silent throughout the investigations. He offered no apologies, no explanations. He simply watched, stone-faced, as the world around him burned with fear and fury. To this day, he's never confessed. But in the court of public opinion, the verdict was clear. Cropsey had a name, and his name was Andre Rand. Thanks for listening to The Devil Within. Make sure you're following wherever you get your podcasts so you don't miss Cropsey Part 2. And if you have any stories from Long Island or the boroughs, email us at info@evocreative.com or message us on Instagram at TheDevilWithinPod. The Devil Within is an EVO production, recorded live at Bel Air Studios in Los Angeles, California. For The Devil Within, I'm Brandon Morgan, your writer and host.